Okay, so we're just discussing next week. If Brush Hill does not close today, Bob, what are your thoughts on the next sort of meeting? I guess timing wise for any sort of Washington or Brush Hill, or are they going to continue to be separate? And is
Yeah,
Washington?
so Zach, I can make it easy on Washington. Washington is we'll continue it next time. It's extremely likely to go away at this point, but
Okay, okay,
for reserving rights, as you lawyers like to say.
yeah, we love that term. It's like we get like a penny
Well,
every time someone says
yeah, we'll hang on for a bit longer, but I don't expect that we will ever really go back to substance on the
it. Okay,
apartment building on Washington. With regard to this, I mean, we did get information, as you may or may not be aware, last minute, but obviously
yeah,
I'm appreciative that we got it at all. Um,
yeah. I just want to jump in, Ron, and say I appreciate both the applicant team, and everyone that's gotten everything out in this short time frame during the holidays. There's a lot
yeah,
of work. A lot
yeah.
of work has been done. So thanks
No,
everyone.
and I'm appreciative of both the new health agent reviewer, which is Stantec, and also Tetra Tech turning things around as quickly as they did, because it does help move things forward, obviously, to have them even
Yeah,
if the day of the meeting. So given that, I've reviewed both of the documents with my engineers, and actually we think that we're in pretty good shape with the two reviewers. And we can turn around. There are some minor issues that we need to tweak, uh, and we're happy to do that. There are some issues which are, not Title V issues, but they're examples of minor clerical stuff required by the Board of Health that we're
yeah,
happy to do just to stay out of, why fuss over things that don't matter.
yeah.
Um, so there's a handful of that stuff from both sets of reviews. We don't think there's anything substantive that's at all a deal killer, or even a significant concern to us in either of the reviews. So we're feeling pretty good, and therefore, I think we can move everything forward on a pretty good pace. It's not like they asked for
Right.
a bunch of things and we need to go do them. In other words, we have now information and we have the reviews. Obviously we're going to give the neighbors, the abutters, a chance to have their say as is appropriate. But we don't need months to do that. So, I would hope that after tonight we could have a list of to-dos. We could get us maybe a sense of where the board is, because some of the issues, if the board is feeling more positive, then maybe we can have conversations about doing more than is required by the regulations. To the extent the board is feeling quite negative, then um, maybe we should just move forward with the current plan. But we can have that discussion
Yep.
at some point. But I feel like our timeline has been should have been shortened by the fairly positive reviews from both of the engineers that came in today.
Yes, I think that's a fair assessment. I did start the meeting, Rick, just to sort of get the conversation on record. Nothing really substantive. We were just sort of talking about any additional pieces we thought we might need to tackle with this project or Washington. It seems like I tend to concur, Bob, with your assessment that given what I saw today, there are some there are no showstoppers necessarily that are shining their lights right now, and it looks like a bunch of sort of clerical things just to avoid maybe some waivers and some deviations. And so, I think that sounds like we're you and I are sort of aligned from that perspective. I don't know where the rest of the board is on that, but
Sure, sure.
with that being said, I would think that you could probably hopefully turn around the corrections or amendments in a month. I would imagine like
Oh,
by
I
early
would, yeah,
February.
I would say faster than that, to the extent
Okay.
that you're comfortable with that. I
Okay.
would say we could be ready to go. Even given, in other words, given the nature of the stuff, and some of it we'll talk about tonight, I hope, because it will inform what we go off and do. But given the nature of it, I think we can have that turned around. What, today's Wednesday? in a week.
Right.
In which case, I think that meeting again in 2 weeks would be moving things forward
Okay.
in a timely way.
Great. Thank you, Bob. I
Obviously,
see.
we are in overtime at this point, but we're in
Yes.
overtime because folks have we've listened to folks and we've come back with a project that we think should be more attractive to the community. Whether that's true or not, of course, remains to be seen. People have to have their say, of course.
Right.
But
Right. Andrew, I see your hands up. I was gonna sort of wait for comments unless you feel that you want to sort of jump in right now.
Yeah.
I wanted to let Bob sort of update.
Thank you. Thank you, Zach. And I'll be brief. Bob, thank you for acknowledging that the abutters and other neighbors will have an opportunity to comment. We did receive Stan Tech's report very late this afternoon, so we haven't had sufficient time to review it. So we welcome that opportunity, and I assume that means that the hearing won't be, or the fact finding won't be closed until we've had that opportunity. Is that correct?
that's
I don't
fair.
anticipate that being the case tonight with the 50 minutes we have remaining. So
Zach, could I just ask
yeah.
Andy a quick question? So you said you received the review from Stantec. There are two versions of that, unfortunately, and I want to make sure that you've
Oh, okay. Well, it's good to know.
Well, yes, it is good to know. I received from the Board of Health from Daryl this morning a review that it wasn't clear that it was an annotated version, but it was, in fact, as it turns out, when I inquired more deeply, it turns out it was an annotated version. At about 5:30 this afternoon, Daryl provided the non-annotated version, which frankly, I think you'll be very interested in reading. There's some stuff in there that was held back initially this morning that's in the second version. So if you have a version that's not on letterhead, that is the selectively annotated version, and it's the full version that you will want to review.
Okay.
I will get that up on the website.
Okay. And Daryl, just real quick, because I want to get into the new information, and I see your hand is raised.
Yes. The point of having sent Bob, there wasn't anything annotated from the standpoint of any changes to the text, but given that there was a short turnaround from when I received it and had time to read it and pull out the parts for Bob that were most important and his team to address in terms of deficiencies on the plan, that's what I sent out. And the board has not yet had a chance to fully review the full memo from the health agent, which normally we have conversations with the health agent about a variety of things before adding it to an agenda. And we also have, the board itself has had more time to review. So we haven't had that. We have our meeting right after yours. I'm going to have to leave a little early to set up that meeting at 7. It is not on the agenda tonight for substantive discussion, merely to point out to the rest of the board about the new materials since December 24th that have come in. A reminder, Bob, we still need a payment for the second revision, which is what was just reviewed. So
I'm good for it,
usually
Daryl, I
comes
promise.
first before we do the review, but in any case, I'm planning to have this on the agenda at the January 22nd meeting, which is 2 weeks from now, where we can review for Title V compliance and discuss any other recommendations that we might want to provide to the ZBA.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Daryl. I appreciate that expedited review in just 2 weeks for this. We would, of course, love to see your input before we close the hearing. So, but I do think that we are marching towards a close soon. So if there's a delay, obviously, let's be in touch and let me know if something sort of derails that timeline. Bob,
Right.
I think you have a lot of Bob, I think you have a lot of new information to present. So I'm gonna sort of, I guess, let you sort of navigate what new information you'd like to present first, if that's okay with you.
Sure. No, absolutely. Thank you. I guess I just would say to, again, to Andy, make sure you're reading the full version of the letter because it's important. Daryl said there
Yeah,
was
we'll,
nothing
we'll
important to me. There were very important things that were left out of the
okay.
short version. So,
Great.
Appreciate the comment. I
yeah,
think
yeah,
we all have to make sure we read the full opinion of the agent. So
yeah,
Thanks,
absolutely.
Bob.
It's important to read the full
yeah.
opinion. So I would love it if Jeannie would be so kind as to put up the full plan.
You want the new site plan,
Yes,
correct?
yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you. I think you're on it. Updated site plan, December 23, 2024. That's
Right
it.
here.
Yep. Yep.
Here we go. That work?
Can't see it yet.
You can't see it?
No, I'm just looking at your files.
Oh, I see it. That's weird. All right.
Yeah,
Maybe
Yeah,
stop sharing and try it again.
yeah, the document isn't being shared.
You see it now?
Yes.
Yes. Now, if you can just make it a little bigger, that'd be great.
Oh, a little bigger.
Lower right corner of your screen.
Got it. Yep, wrong way. Is that big enough?
Yeah, I think so. Sure.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Chief.
So, okay. So, obviously I've been listening to folks as they've commented on the original project of 8 two-bedroom homes. Actually, the original project way back when for the Pell was 4 3-bedrooms and 4 4-bedrooms. But we fell back to 8 2-bedrooms, and that's what was presented to this board originally. I listened to a lot of the comments. You know, density was discussed, the amount of impervious surface was discussed. There, there were a lot of different things that were put forth. Importantly, a 1962 comment on an A&R plan about buildings within those 2 dotted lines that come across. It's a rectangle that you all can see coming off the center of the property that's it's 160 feet wide and runs from the front to the back, which the abutters have said that needed to be followed in a 40B, that buildings couldn't go there. We don't agree with that, but that is what was said and by the abutters. It was claim made by the abutters. So as we discussed briefly at the last meeting, I went back and tried to come up with something that I thought we could actually come to an agreement on. I did sit down with the abutters at one point, a significant abutter at one point, to try to see if I could get some input about, something that might be more comfortable. Unfortunately, we didn't get very far in terms of kind of mutually agreeable ideas. And so I had to kind of go forth with my own ideas, which I now have done. While I don't agree with the 1962 comment on the A&R, I decided to respect that. And the abutters did not want buildings clearly in that zone. I have now respected that. I dropped the number of homes from 8 to 4. I dropped the number of bedrooms from 16 to 12. So I dropped the septic density by 25%, the impervious surface. I sent you these numbers. I'm not going to read them, but suffice it to say that all of the metrics of kind of impervious surface and density and all of these things have been reduced substantially, close to a 50% reduction. Obviously, bedrooms a 25% reduction. We left a lot of natural. One of the things that I heard from abutters was that they didn't want to see, the whole property cleared. And obviously our 8-home plan did require us to clear a lot of the property. This plan is responsive to that. It's a hammerhead access, as you can see, very simple. I have spent some time reviewing that with Fire Chief Zach Ward, and I believe Zach, that he sent you, the other Zach, an email today, in which he said that he had worked with me and we made some changes. We added a 20,000 gallon water tank, which not only will make homeowners insurance cheaper for our four homes, the residents of our four homes, but frankly, for all of the abutters, their property insurance rates should go down significantly due to that addition of the available water on site and nearby. I'm trying to think what else. I think I heard comments about distances to homes. The distance from our new homes to the existing homes in the area. And what I would say about that is I'm proposing homes that are more than double the distance from the existing abutting homes than is the distance between the existing abutting homes. So, for example, number 32 Brush Hill is 320 feet from one of our homes, from the closest of our proposed homes. And number 32 is only 200 feet away from Andy's home at number 36. Number 36 is Andy's home, number 36 is 440 feet from the closest Brush Hill proposed home, and his closest existing neighbor is 100 feet away. And so, I feel like this is not kind of a change in terms of the kind of distance between homes in the neighborhood at all. And in fact, I think it's kind of respectful of that. I recognize the driveway is the hammerhead part of the driveway is close to the property line. It's 5 feet off of the property line. And the reason it's 5 feet off the property line is that that's the Sherborn local regulation for a driveway. A driveway under Sherborn regulations needs to be 5 feet from a property line. So even though obviously I have the ability to ask for a waiver from that particular regulation, I chose to meet the local regulation. And in fact, this project, I am not asking for a lot of what I'll call substantive waivers. Obviously, there's some depth to groundwater, naturally occurring depth to groundwater. There's depth from the septic system to groundwater, to estimated high groundwater, that we're seeking a waiver of a 1 foot from, because 1 foot is Title 5, 4 feet is Title 5, and the local is 5 feet. But a lot of our distances between wells and septic systems, both abutting wells and abutting septic systems and our own, are all compliant with the local rules. Anyway, so I think this is, while I recognize that 40Bs are not popular in Sherborn, I think this is about as close as you're going to get to, kind of something that meets almost all of the local regulations. So I think that's all I have to say. I'll take questions at this point.
Just a quick question for me. Where are the wells for I can't see units 1 and 2. I just can't. I don't see them on the
So
plan.
if you blow up the plan, you'll see that there is one well is just whoops. Bring the plan up a little bit, Jeannie, please. So I can see the bottom 2 homes, the lower homes, sorry.
Sorry.
Oops, no worries. No, yeah, you're on the wrong page,
Yep.
Jeannie.
I got it.
Mhm.
There.
There you go.
There we go.
If you blow that up a little bit, I can answer Zach's question. The first well is just above home number 3 and to the right. There's a little W
I
with
see it.
circle
Yep, I
around
see
it.
that.
Yep.
Yep, and I
So
see the other one. I
that's
see the
one
other one.
well. And by the way, that does not meet the 20 feet to a driveway local requirement, but the local rules also say that if you protect it, you can be as close as 5 feet. I think we're 10 or 12 there, and we'll have protection so that we will be in compliance with the local rules. And then the second well is down between the two, whoops,
Oh, sorry.
down between the two driveways going in. So the hammerhead then has two gray driveways going in, and the well is smack dab in the middle.
Gosh, it's Gina.
Yep, and then for the, I see that. Yeah, I see those two. What about the other homes?
It'll be one well for each two homes. So the well on the upper side, the first
Yeah.
well I described to you, will feed the two homes number 1 and 2, and the second well will feed homes number 2 and 3. I reserve the right, and I don't think anybody is going to complain about this, that if obviously you have to dig the wells and see how strong they are. If they're weaker wells, then we can have a well. We've got the room to have a well for for each of the 4 homes. But it's frankly cheaper for the homeowners to share a well between 2 homes. That actually does require a waiver, as most folks know, I think.
In terms of, this is a question about that. In terms
Yeah.
of the flow, the local minimums for flow,
Yeah.
given that it's a shared, I guess you're just going to count the bedrooms and apply the same math. Or are you seeking a waiver from the local flow? You don't know yet, but
Well, I would think that to the extent we use one well for 2 homes, we'll meet the local flows.
4-hour test,
Yeah, we're certainly willing to do the test that is done by any single family home in Sherborn.
Yeah, I think that would be I think just that's my gut reaction,
Yeah.
is that would have to be solid for the
Sure.
bedroom,
And
for the
as
bedroom, for the bedroom counts that you have combined.
Yeah, and as I said, if there are lots of homes in Sherborn with 6 bedrooms in them, obviously, and so we're feeding 2 3-bedroom homes. So, but I don't want to give 2 homeowners a crappy well that's going to not.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, is there a reason why on this map, as it's shown right now, you don't have the wells farther to the left in the the areas away from the driving, the traveled ways, which could be contaminated with salt or oils or things of that nature?
Yeah, it's a good question, Zach. It certainly.
And also avoid the protection issue, which I know you said you were successful recently. I was not, so I'm jealous of that. I'm sure my neighbor would have liked to have avoided putting a well in as well. So, but the point the Board of Health made, which I do respect, was that it's someone else's well, and if someone hits it, neighbors may agree today, but the future, who knows what it's going to hold. So
Yeah.
I think that avoiding that situation where you have other people relying on that traveled way, I think would be ideal. But that's my perspective.
Yeah, so obviously, or not, perhaps it's not obvious, but we are constrained because we don't want to ask for a waiver for the 150-foot setback from the well to the septic system. So you see that dotted line that touches unit 3. We're we're not constrained. We could ask you for a waiver, but we want to play by the rules to the extent possible. And the local rule is 150 feet. So we're constrained by that. That said, I mean, honestly, Zach, if we get down to approving this thing and you want us to move that well to the backyard of unit 3, let's have that conversation. I mean, they're pretty minor issues, to be honest. These are compliant.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, they can.
But I get your point, though. I get your point.
They can be made compliant. I just think, and obviously, do you know which one of you don't know which one of these is going to be the affordable unit? I mean, I guess both wells are pretty. I think both wells present the same risk, so I don't think it really makes much of a difference.
Yeah, I think they're kind of the same thing. It gets more difficult to install them as you go down that hill. So I know. Yeah.
Well, I'm aware.
Exactly.
So I'm going to stop talking and monopolizing the conversation and turn it over to my board members first if they have any questions or comments.
Well, thank you. I would just like to say that this is a much improved plan over what we've been dealing with. I do want to hear from the abutters, of course, but my initial reaction to this is favorable. I think that a lot of the concerns that we've had have been addressed with this plan and the reduced number of units and the location of the units, and leaving much of the property undisturbed. Does the, I mean, I'd like to hear from our council whether the traveled way over that center area would be encompassed by the no build.
Yeah, I, as a non-lawyer, Jonathan, I can tell you that the language says that you can't construct a building. And I certainly don't take the word building to mean, it doesn't say you can't build anything. It says you can't construct a building. And I think it's a stretch to say a driveway is a building, but that's I'm not a lawyer, and I'm just trying to give you the information on what it says.
Well, Bob, you play an excellent lawyer on television.
He's been around him too much. I think that's the problem.
To his detriment, as Cardozo would say. But I think Bob has the reading of this document right. I mean, we'll see what Mike Terry says, but I think it's buildings, Jonathan, not any construction. And I otherwise second and agree with the wise comments of Mr. Justice Fitch.
Well, that's all I have, Zach.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you joining and appreciate the feedback. Todd, any thoughts or feelings from you? I don't know if you can share anything. I know you're not feeling well, but I won't press if you're not doing well.
No further comments from me. I would echo my fellow board members' sentiments.
Great. Thank you, Todd. Gene, I guess if there's any other public questions or comments, and Gene can see your hand because I surely cannot, then please raise it. One of these days I'll figure out how to have.
Can I stop sharing the screen, or do we want it still up?
Why don't we stop for now unless someone needs it?
Okay, we have Scott Horsley and Andrew hands are raised.
Why don't we go with Andrew first, and we'll hear from Scott.
Okay. I don't think it does anybody any good, for me or anybody, frankly, to provide a preliminary assessment of the plan without seeing the whole plan and having an opportunity to review it carefully. As I said at the last meeting, the devil is always in the details. And I'd like to, large or small or not at all, I'd like to have the opportunity to review it very carefully first before giving an opinion. And I would counsel others to do the same. And with that, I'd like to hear from Scott, but of course, Zach, you're the chair.
No, that's okay. Thanks, Andrew. No, I appreciate it. No, I feel confident that I have the ability to change my opinion too. So my wife will agree with that frustratingly. So Mr. Horsley, could you please share your thoughts? I see that you've provided some additional comments of late, and I think they made it on the website before the meeting.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, just a brief couple of comments. I did hear Mr. Murchison say twice tonight, and I think it's probably recorded, that we are constrained. I think it was his words, and I agree. This is a constrained site, and I agree the proposal that has been put forth is less density than the prior one, but as he said, and I agree with him, it's a constrained site. These are shallow groundwater. What he's proposing is significantly more than what's allowed under existing zoning, which I believe was developed in part for groundwater, drinking water protection and septic, and Sherborn is clearly constrained by that. The one, I guess I would like to have the opportunity to submit some comments, some additional comments on the revised plans and some of the peer review comments, because I have some concerns about them. But the one specific question I would put through you, Mr. Chair, is the current plans are not nearly as detailed as the prior plans. And the prior plans for the septic system showed a impermeable barrier that was to be put in on the immediately adjacent to the septic system. To my knowledge, that does not show in the current plans. And I believe that has a significant effect on the potential functioning of the system, the groundwater mounding. So through you, I'm wondering if you could put a question. The plans don't show an impermeable barrier. Does that mean there is none? Or it's not on the plans, or it's going to show up later? Because that's an important feature in my mind for determining whether or not the system. And the second comment related to that is the applicant has asked for a waiver from the 5-foot separation. I'm not sure what justification has been provided to your board by the Board of Health for that. There is scientific evidence, which I'm happy to provide, as to why a 5-foot separation is important, especially for a system that's 4 times larger than a single family home. This is a protection distance that is important for groundwater water quality protection. So I'm just not sure if they've provided, I haven't seen it, the justification for that waiver. So those are my 2 comments for tonight, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horsley. I appreciate that. I think in Stantec's report, they recommended an impermeable barrier, if I recall scanning that correctly. So I would hope to see that on the updated plans. I also, I also, I'm not saying it would be a requirement. My sentiment right now is I hope to see it on the updated plans. And as for the depth to groundwater, I also, I guess I have a question, which is that, can you raise, can you meet Title V or I guess, can you raise the system and have 5 feet of separation is the question I have. And does it just necessitate a larger retaining wall or a tiered retaining wall? I guess.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may just respond briefly to the first point, which is the impermeable barrier. That is my understanding too, that the impermeable barrier probably is proposed, but it's not on the plans. So the plans are incomplete. And Stantec.
That's not correct, Scott.
If I can.
No, Bob, if you could just, Bob, it's his opinion. Bob, it's his opinion, and he can have it.
No, it's not his opinion. He's making a statement about my plan. So
well, Bob, it's his opinion about your plan.
What my plan is.
Bob, please don't be sensitive about this. I don't think that he's making a determination about your plan. It's not. It's his opinion. So you don't need to be defensive. I don't take it as such. It's his opinion. So,
Mr. Murchison, I will not interrupt you, sir. I hope you respect.
Let's all maintain decorum. We don't have a lot of time tonight. I know there's a lot of new material.
I would be done if Mr. Murchison hadn't. May I make my point? If he doesn't interrupt me again, thank you, please. And I will not.
And I will say this, Mr. Horsley. There's practices in this town that delay things unnecessarily as well, and I will say that from my own experience. So I do empathize with some of Bob's frustration, but that being said, we need to maintain decorum. We all do. So the impermeable barrier, I feel, was a good recommendation from Stantec. I would like to see it on the next plan. Is the plan incomplete? I don't know. I'm not an expert. You can have an opinion about that. On the depth to groundwater, I'd like you to respond as to whether or not we can achieve 5 feet of separation with a raised system that works.
Well, Mr. Chairman, may I respond on the impermeable barrier, what I was saying before Mr. Murchison interrupted me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So my point is that Stantec's review did not include the impermeable barrier, which has effects on groundwater mounding. They did an evaluation of the groundwater mounding, which did not include the impermeable barrier. And I understand why they did that, because it is not on the plan. That is my point. Okay, I think that it's important that your peer reviewer who does groundwater mounding takes into account the impermeable barrier. And I understand why they didn't, because it is not on the plan. It's that simple.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you. And as to the 5 feet of separation with a mounded system, can you just speak to that for a second as to educate me as to whether that's something that is, workable from your perspective?
Is that a question for me, Ms. Fury?
Yes, that is a question for you, Scott.
I don't know. As Mr. Murchison said, the site is constrained. It's difficult. So maybe they cannot make that. I don't know. That's a question for Mr. Murchison, I believe.
Okay, but I guess I'm not necessarily asking about the constraints of this site. I'm sort of generically, can you achieve 5 feet of separation with a system that is mounted?
Sure, it happens all the time. Septic systems commonly have way more than 4 or 5 feet. Some of them have 10 feet or more. And there's plenty of documentation by Mass DEP that the more vertical separation you have, the better water quality treatment you have. The 4 feet separation was designed based upon a single family home. The larger the flow, you have to go to higher treatment or higher vertical separation. Sherborn regulations have been developed based upon the fact that developers such as this one may not be providing a wastewater treatment plant. They may be providing a basic Title V system. So if they go more than a single family home, then a greater vertical separation would be required. That's the purpose of the regulations, public health.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Horsley.
You're welcome.
Dan, I see your hand popped up, I think, before Daryl. So if you want to comment.
Great.
Dan Hill.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Dan Hill. I'm an attorney in Boston, and I represent the 2 direct abutters, the Natalis and the Latterbacks. I did submit a comment letter to the board on January 2nd. I did copy the applicant on that letter. and I echo, my client's comment from the beginning that we're all open-minded, and I think we just need some more time to digest what's been submitted. I haven't seen, frankly, the peer review reports. I see some things were posted in the last day or two on the website. I just saw literally half hour ago Mr. Murchison's responses to my letter. He didn't copy me on that email, which was unfortunate. I mean, I've copied him on my stuff, so it's too bad it can't be reciprocated. But I can. It's true, Mr. Murchison, you didn't copy me, so.
Let's just. I think we just need to respond through me tonight. So let's just. If we have, let's try to just cut the commentary about behaviors. I appreciate that everyone's frustrated with certain, players, common players, but let's just try to keep it to a minimum and keep it to the substance. That's fine, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. So I just want to make a few highlighted points from my comments, as well as to respond to Mr. Murchison's responses. First, I think obviously a 4-unit plan. This does address some of our concerns that we had with the 8-unit plan, but I think an important point that's been missed is that the number of bedrooms was not cut in half; it was dropped from 16 to 12. So the impacts from the septic system, it's not a 50% reduction, right? So we still have some significant concerns about where the wastewater is going to be going and what direction. We don't have any kind of environmental impact analysis, and that's something that we've asked for a few times, and I think that's a subject of some debate, whether or not that's required. The Board of Health regulations do require an environmental health impact statement for all Chapter 40B projects. Now, the applicant's asking for a waiver from that, and the applicant has the right to ask for a waiver, but the board does not have to grant it. So we are suggesting that in this situation where there are private wells both on the project site and abutting the project site, and a project that's served by a private septic system, in a project that's more dense than would be allowed in Sherborn in this location, that environmental health impact statement is appropriate and should be done. Now, perhaps not a full-blown statement. Perhaps it can be negotiated. Perhaps there are specific things that we can narrowly tailor to achieve the data points that we need to have a level of comfort, and the board should have that level of comfort before it issues any kind of decision on this project. Just briefly on the layout, I understand the comment that driveways can be, constructed within up to 5 feet to a property line. Sure, maybe, but does it have to be? And frankly, the first thing I saw when I saw this 4-unit plan was it just seemed spiteful to me that we have a driveway, which is really it's a common driveway, and it acts like a road serving 4 housing units that's built on the property line. This is a large property, a large site, where things could be spread out. And to put the driveway on the property line strikes me as offensive and totally unnecessary. So it's unfortunate that was done. We would urge the applicant to reconsider that choice and to provide more of a buffer
to the existing neighbors for that driveway. With respect to the water quality impacts of the project, as I stated, there isn't currently, and nor has there ever been, any water table or groundwater flow direction data provided by the applicant. There still isn't. We don't know where the water table is. We don't know the groundwater flow directions. And the first thing that the applicant would need to do if they were to provide and to analyze this properly would be to prepare a groundwater contour map. From that groundwater contour map, then you can basically establish groundwater flow directions, and you'd also know how deep the bedrock aquifer is in this location. So there's a lot of data that hasn't been provided that would give us, again, some comfort level as to what direction the wastewater will flow once it's recharged into the ground and how fast it'll move. Will it go through the overburden or will it go through the bedrock? And I don't need to pontificate on the science of this. There are people who can speak much more intelligently, and I'm sure this has been discussed in Sherborn in the past, but once water hits bedrock, it moves in directions that is oftentimes unpredictable. And so in this case, we don't know where the bedrock is. We don't know whether the wastewater that's entering the ground in this location will enter the bedrock, and if so, in what direction it'll move. And again, there are private wells surrounding this project site, or at least on 3 sides. Just moving to some of the issues of the wells on the project site. I did note in my letter that the wells have 150-foot protective radii, but the radii are not actually totally on the project site. Those radii encroach upon abutting properties. So in other words, those wells are not protected by the land that the applicant controls. That's not good planning. It may be legal, but it's certainly not good planning, because somebody on an abutting property could do something in their property that's within the 155-foot radius of that well that could threaten that well, and the applicant or the future owner of that well would have no ability to prevent that from happening. Likewise, the septic system, the leaching field, the 150-foot radii around that leaching field encroaches upon abutting properties. That's not fair to the abutting properties, because essentially creates a physical encumbrance on the abutting property. Again, bad planning. Maybe it's legal, but certainly not advisable or desirable. Where you have a project that's much bigger, there's room to spread things around. Perhaps it's cheaper to move everything to the front of the site, but it's not good planning. So in sum, with respect to the project that's been filed, we would like to see more data. We'd like to see the applicant perform the types of water quality impact analysis that we think is appropriate, that we've called for in our letters. This doesn't have to be a huge lift, but it certainly would give the board more information and more evidence of whether there's going to be any impacts on abutting wells and even the project's own wells. To date, there isn't that level of comfort. And then finally, just to address a few things that were raised in Mr. Murchison's emails with respect to the environmental health impact requirement. It is required under the recent amendments to the Board of Health regulations. So I'm not sure where the comment goes for that. It wasn't required. It is required. With respect to the turnaround, lack of turnaround areas on the project site, Mr. Murchison referred to an email that was given by the fire chief to the board, to the zoning board. I read that email. I don't see anything in the email that addresses the turnaround areas. The fire chief seemed comfortable with the width of the driveway. The fire code, the state fire code, actually mandates turnaround areas. So this isn't coming from me. It's coming from state regulations. So I'm just simply stating the fact that there are no turnaround areas where they are actually required. So that's all I have to say tonight, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for listening to us, and we'll be providing more comments as the hearings progress.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate your feedback and time. Daryl, I know you have to leave early and your hand is raised, so let's hear what you have to say.
All right, I'll give you the very abbreviated version. A little reminder that Title V is a state minimum. That means it's supposed to be something that is practical to implement in places that, for example, truly have something like 1% of the residents being served by a septic system, and they have a municipal water supply, in which case the 4-foot separation and some of the other things that are being done on this property are unlikely to affect the water that people are drinking and have the same kind of potential health effects. In this case, because of the soils, because of the depths of groundwater, essentially all that's going to be underneath the trenches is going to be sand. That's specified by Title V. Again, that's purely to make sure that the material is infiltrating into the ground. Does not do a good job of treatment. Would you rather drink something that was filtered by sand or by a very complex mix of soil that has spots that chemicals and bacteria and viruses can adhere to and react with, and it's more chemically complex. So that's part of the difference. So you're having a not enormous, but relatively large system in one area, as opposed to distributed systems for each of the homes, for filtering ability of the Title V sand and shallow depths of groundwater. So not ideal, but the Board of Health hasn't had a chance to discuss this yet, so there'll be more coming. So this is my personal perspective, and thank you, and I'm afraid I have to drop off now.
Thank you, Daryl. Appreciate the input. Are there any other comments from the public before I turn back to the board and then sort of talk about next steps? I don't see any other hands raised, so board members. Oh, sorry, Andrew, I see. I guess maybe yours is raised. Andrew, is your hand raised?
The audio is off.
Yeah.
Here I come.
I am so sorry about that. I have a question about the driveway, Bob. There are symbols on the driveway, which I assume are drains to drain stormwater. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know exactly what you're talking about because we're not looking at it together, but that sounds
Yeah.
like maybe.
Are you looking
Okay.
at lines? Are you looking at lines on the
No,
road?
they're little circles at various locations on the drive.
Well, so I know that there is, the stormwater is managed along the driveway. So without
Okay,
looking at it, I'm gonna,
you're answering my question.
Yeah,
And that stormwater, I assume, leads down into the property.
it
Is that
leads
right?
toward the property. That's correct. Yes.
Okay, underground by piping. Right.
Uh,
I was just concerned about flooding.
yeah. And in fact, that came up in the Tetra Tech comment letter. You'll see
Yeah.
that they asked about that. So,
Okay, great. Thanks for the clarification.
absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew. Any other questions from the public before I turn back to the board?
Trying to raise my hand.
Sure, Michael.
Michael Lesser, 54 Forest Street. In this point, I'm just talking as a Conservation Commission member. I guess I'd say that it would be interesting or useful to have for us what some of the analyses are requested about the analysis of the area of impact and such, just to see what where the groundwater is flowing in terms of the system being in sort of partly, or it depends how you define the system, is in the buffer zone of the wetlands, and it's just about 100 feet away, the actual trenches, and what might be coming towards the wetlands from these systems. It's a gray area for us as to how far we go on some of the nitrogen analyses of what might be hitting wetlands in terms of this having some negative adverse impact on the wetlands, but it would be useful for us if that stuff was pursued. And I'll leave it at that for now. And plus, eventually, and I guess it'll come before us, so we could deal with landscaping issues and what the areas are being disturbed. And work through that.
Yeah, I did see Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that comment. It did, raise one concern I just wanted to voice, Bob, about that was mentioned, and I think it was maybe it was Tetra Tech's. I don't know which letter it was, but it was around the removal of drainage basins, and then the thought that there might be maybe some re-inclusion of something other than just daylighting stormwater. So I think that was a valid, sort of a point that I thought was interesting. So I just want to hear your feedback. I don't know if there's a much less invasive or expensive sort of drainage ponds or other things that you might have in mind you just may not have included in this plan, or if you had read that maybe you had a thought. So
sure, I can speak to that. There, I mean, I get the impression you want to cut this thing off fairly soon, Zach, and that's your call. You're the chair. There's a lot of things.
No, the rest of my party is all on work calls, so we're all bound to the Zoom tonight. So don't rush.
Anyway, what I was going to say.
We have a few more minutes.
There are a lot of things that I like to briefly comment on that were said. In many cases, just kind of correcting what I believe is what we've proposed. In other words, my frustration with Scott, and I apologize for interrupting, but my frustration is that he was saying things about my plan that weren't true, and that you can imagine that that's frustrating. It wasn't an opinion. It was actually a statement of fact about whether an impermeable barrier existed in the plan, which it does not, and it was not a mistake. It is intentionally not there. It also, by Tetra Tech, noted that was in fact compliant. They suggested putting in the barrier, but they also said that the plan as proposed was compliant, and it was intentionally proposed without that barrier. It was not a mistake. And I just wanted to clarify that.
No, I appreciate that clarification. Yeah. And I think the Stantec, the substitute agent from the Board of Health, I think mentioned it as a precautionary measure. Maybe I read that wrong, but I thought that's how I read it.
Yeah, we'll have to go back through them, one by one, obviously. To answer your question about stormwater, Zach, as you saw in the engineer's cover letter on this plan, we are not subject to the stormwater regulations. We have shown stormwater along the driveway right. I'm sorry?
So someone just was, I think somebody's not on mute. That's okay, Bob.
Okay.
That wasn't directed to you.
Yeah. We have in fact shown some stormwater along the driveway, which we felt was important. Some additional stormwater is something that if you're in a mood to approve the plan, we can have those conversations and come to some agreements about some non-required additional stormwater. The point is, it's not required under local or state statute. And to me, that's important to note, but we want to work with this board we want to work with this board if in fact, we're heading toward an approval. We're comfortable with that. So that's what I would say about stormwater.
Yeah, I think, I'll just be transparent. I think it's a slope that goes towards the wetlands. I have that experience myself. When there's a lot of rain, I see what happens. I think you've got a lot of houses and maybe more impermeable areas. And so it might just be something, to have a little bit of more thought than nothing would be my
willing to work with you.
Maybe a swale or something just to, mitigate velocity so you're not rutting things or something like that. That's sort of
I agree with you completely. Yep.
Or my head goes.
So, one of the things I'd like to address is these issues that were raised about additional information, because I think that's an important request from the abutters, and it's an important answer from me, and that is that this type of analysis is not required at all by local or by state. Excuse me. It is required under local if you're an affordable housing project. Under any other circumstances of construction in Sherborn, it would not, or of zoning. In other words, if I was getting a special permit and going to build, an Abbey Road type of project here, it would not require, with the exact same design, it would not require it. It's only affordable housing that is being asked to do this analysis. And frankly, I object.
So yeah, so can we just, so on that point, is it my understanding, I have to reread the regulations, and I do want to ask my board for feedback on what their thoughts on the additional information is. I have my opinion, but I will hold until I hear theirs first.
Can I bring up the local regulation that you're alluding to? We can look at it together.
I think I can maybe just for expediency, maybe sum it up, and you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
That I don't think it is written specifically to mention 40Bs, but you're saying
No,
that
no, it is. It is
of the regulation.
If
So
Jeannie
it calls
can,
out the 40B regulation, or
yes, yes.
so
If
well,
Jeannie can bring it up, we can all look at it together.
yeah,
I
if
think
Jeannie
we're
can
being
bring it up,
fine.
maybe she can, but I see Rick's hand is physically raised, so I'm gonna ask Rick to comment. And you're on mute, Rick.
If it's helpful, Mr. Chairman, I might direct a question to Mr. Haverty through you that may shed some light on this. And if it doesn't, then I apologize to everybody for wasting their time. Paul, is it your view and the view of your client that because the regulation in question mentions 40B, you're categorically exempt essentially? Oh, now you're muted.
No, you're on mute, Paul.
I
There you go.
can't
No,
hear me.
it just broke it. It was breaking up for a second.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I would say that the fact that in this aspect, the regulation or the bylaw only applies to 40B developments and no other developments in town makes it categorically unenforceable. Because it's therefore subjecting subsidized housing to treatment that unsubsidized housing in town is not subjected to, and is therefore violative of General Laws Chapter 40B, Section 20.
Right. Okay. So Zach, Paul, thank you. That's exactly what I expected to hear. For once, Zach, I think what the issue here, and maybe we can talk with Mike Terry about it, is the fact that regulation, in my view, very inadvisably mentions 40B as opposed to large projects. Does that make it categorically unenforceable, as Paul says, or not? And I think that's something on which we ought to get guidance from Mike Terry. Because I understand his argument. I'm not necessarily persuaded by Paul Haverty's argument, but that's going to be it. It's whether or not mentioning 40B as a reason for that regulation disqualifies it.
And to clarify, it's not just mentioning, it's calling out 40B solely.
Yeah, I
It's
agree.
not applicable to any other similarly sized development in town.
Okay. Well, I have my
we all agree it says what it says.
I've got my plain homework for Sunday. So on that, are there any other comments sort of to the additional requests for information from the board that were discussed tonight? And any sort of we want to give sort of a to-do list to the development team. So Rick.
Zach, but my question is for you, and I want to make sure I heard the colloquy back and forth between Mr. Horsley and Mr. Murchison correctly. I think where it settled was that Stantec, there is not a impermeable barrier on the plan now. That's not an accident. Stantec has recommended one. That's not an accident either. And Horsley was saying, to the extent that one comes in, he wants the groundwater flows reevaluated because the presence of the impermeable barrier would affect the analysis. Maybe better, maybe worse, but it would affect it.
Yes, and our Gen AI assistant just resuscitated the entire meeting for us. So
okay.
No, that was great. That was great, Rick. That was perfect. Thank you. I think that's exactly as I understand it as well. And Bob is choosing not to put in an impermeable barrier. At least that seems to be a sentiment because potentially would affect groundwater mounding.
Yeah, and just to clarify, Zach, on this issue, and it's a little technical, but it'll only take 20 seconds, and that is the impermeable barrier that we put in originally was required because of the slope. We were able, or the setback, if you will, we were able to increase that setback and meet the setback that then negates the requirement for the impermeable barrier.
Is the word breakout, is that the word I'm thinking about versus setback, or is that, the distance from the downhill distance
It's
from
the
the edge of the
50,
bleaching?
we changed it to 15 feet. And when we did that, that negated the requirement in Title V of the impermeable barrier, and we removed it. Now, I do agree that Stantec is saying they would like to see it. However, I hope you all agree that Stantec says it is not required by Title V.
Yes, I did read that.
Yeah.
Based on the numbers. Jonathan, Rick, in terms of asks, if you felt like it would lead towards, a productive conversation, do you have any based on the comments that Mr. Hill or Mr. Horsley brought up in terms of additional information that may not be required, but as we may move towards an approval, we feel that we would need them to, dial in waivers or things of that, or things of that nature.
Jonathan, you first.
Well, I would like a thorough response from the applicant to the concerns that have been raised by Mr. Horsley and Mr. Hill.
To us, if I may speak, Zach, is that okay?
Yes, please.
So to a certain extent, the part of the review that that Daryl did not send to us, that was withheld and was sent at 5:30. I'm just going to read 2 sentences from that review. This is the Stantec, additional Stantec commentary. The first sentence is, mounding analysis is not required by either Title V or BOH regulations for systems with flow less than 2,000 gallons per day. As you all know, we're 1,300 and change. And then the end of that paragraph says, the Horsley mounding analysis of the former SAS design is flawed because of the following input errors. And I'm not going to read them to you because it's over my head. This whole concept of a mounding analysis is not something that's done with market rate housing at this scale. It was in Dan's letter. He said that it was required, but he left out the sentence that in the local bylaw just before what he quoted, the preceding sentence says, for any subdivision having 10 or more dwelling lots or any project having a minimum design wastewater flow of 4,400 gallons per day, a hydrogeological evaluation shall be performed. So what I am saying is that I understand what they are asking for, but it is completely inappropriate under the law, given the scale of these 4, the development of 4 homes. It's not done.
So
I just
Bob,
permitted 4 buildings on 4 acres over on Washington Street, 16 bedrooms on 4 acres. And I wasn't asked to do any of this. And now I'm doing 12 bedrooms on 5 acres and I'm being asked to do it. And I find that really concerning. It's not appropriate. And that's why I'm pushing back and saying this is not something that we
Bob, I think I'm going to try to channel my inner Rick Novak here. And my days from learning from Mr. Haverty's partner in law school. There's often times the developers don't have to do something, but it is beneficial for them to do things for the sake of getting the project done. And so I would say, I agree with, again, I empathize with your frustration. However, I think that I would like to have a productive conversation about what things you may be willing to do that you don't believe you have to do within reason for the sake of allowing us to feel comfortable with a project that I think is marching towards it's moving in the very much in the right direction of what we would like to see to approve. That's my perspective. I don't want to speak for the rest of the board, but that's my perspective. And so if we can ask you to spend a few more dollars in good faith to just help us feel more comfortable, and that it's not a showstopper, but maybe it's like, maybe it's like we're moving the well 20 feet, okay? Something like that. That's kind of where I feel. And I know that's difficult for you to swallow because you're like, oh, well, you're just going to deny me if I give you some information, and I'm just going to spend this much more money, and we're just going to end up in the same place. So I understand your perspective here too. So I would like to try to, find a way in the next meeting to figure out, with all the corrections that you're going to have, what it is that we might be able to get to that's more than you need to do, but might be something in a direction that helps us get to a decision that, maybe you're happier with than the last ones. So that's my perspective. And I hope I didn't speak out of turn. No one's told me to shut up yet, particularly Rick. So I think that I'm doing okay.
Well, Zach, I guess I thank you for that. I guess my response is to turn it around on you all. In other words, I don't want to guess what's going to make you comfortable.
Yeah, that's why I keep going to my board and asking them.
So. Yeah, and so I've suggested some ideas tonight. You want a little more stormwater? Let's talk about that, right?
I think
I'm not interested in doing these evaluations, which I just do not see the value in for a project of 4 single-family homes. I just got finished permitting market rate single-family homes at this scale, and this was not brought forward, and it's being brought forward now in a subsidized project, and I just think that's a really, really bad place to go. That said, my ears are open. If you tell me what you're interested
I will tell you, I'm not trying to penalize you because it's a subsidized project. I am looking at it more like because it's moderately more dense than a single family home on the same lot. And that's the way I'm looking at it. It may not trigger anything, but that would be where I would say it's worth asking the question, and it's worth asking the question, having the discussion. So with that, I'm being told by our assistant that makes everything work, she has to leave this meeting and go start another meeting. And so unfortunately, Bob, I don't think we're going to be able to give you a list of to-dos, but I think you know what your list of to-dos are based on all the latest information that you have in terms of updating the plans to the level of completeness that you feel is sort of as complete as it can possibly be, given the direction you want to go in. I think at the next meeting, we should probably then address, hopefully the next meeting is in 2 weeks or so, if there's any additional things that you are willing to do, what those might be. Rick.
Mr. Chairman, if it helps, I might ask the applicant team that they simply say, look, we're willing to do X, Y, and Z, and we reserve our rights. We're not waiving anything under any of the regulations, things like that. Again, trying to move towards what you suggest, which is people trying to find a way to make this an approvable project without everybody going to the mattresses on whether or not a full environmental impact review under the local regulation is required, because it seems to be we could spend a lot of time and energy and lawyers on that without moving the project ahead very much. So
yeah. So what I feel like I want to do over the coming weeks, Zach, and you can comment on this, is we have a full engineering review by 2 parties, one of whom, your reviewer, has said this is Title V compliant and has not raised any, what I see in a cursory read today, any material issues. I believe Stantec, while they haven't used that same language, and they did make a mistake in that they called it a shared system, which clearly under Title V, this is not a shared system. By definition, literally by definition in Title V, it's not a shared system. But generally, the Stantec comments are all addressable in short order. I am willing to go back and address in great detail all of the comments of the professional engineers that have spoken to this. And I feel as though that should give the board comfort, and you can invite the professional engineers to come in after I've provided that information and opine as to whether they think this is a safe design or not. My sense is they're already well on their way to saying that, and in fact,
Yep.
Tetra Tech has already said that. But I do not see the benefit in taking an evaluation or a type of evaluation which is very, very expensive and time consuming when it is, we're operating at, in the case of section 8.02, which Dan Hill quoted in his letter, we're proposing a site that is 30% of the wastewater flow of what triggers this requirement.
No, I understand. I understand. So I think we have a lot of new information today. I think if you can respond substantively to what was revealed today in the last 2 days or whatever, that would be helpful. Let's talk about a next meeting date if we could.
How's a couple of weeks?
Yeah, I mean, I have nothing. Let me just look at my calendar. I don't think there's anything in particular.
21st, 22nd, something like that, 23rd. No, 23rd is not good for me. 20, 21, 22.
When's MLK this year? Probably
20.
You're right. I think it's 20th, and we shouldn't meet that day. So 21
Right.
or 22 would be my proposal.
Board of
I
Health
really
is
want
meeting.
to. I want to obviously move this forward. And
Sure.
you all want to get this done.
Either 21 or 22 could work for me.
That's before the Board of Health gets to review and give you the formal comments that they're voting on, just so you
On
remember.
the 22nd. Thank
That's
you.
a separate. That's a
It's not a
separate
commission.
regulatory matter.
That may affect this scheduling.
Yeah, I think that
Can we jump in?
I think that
Scott, you're not muted.
yeah, Scott, if you could just mute. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
I think if we could meet on the 22nd, I don't think we're going to be wrapped up. I just that's my impression. I think we're going to have one more meeting after that, Bob. If that's
I agree with that. Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll be able to incorporate the boards. So let's do the 22nd if that works for everyone.
And I will respond in detail to all of the engineering comments that I've received and any additional comments that come in, in a timely way. I'll try my best to respond to that as well.
Appreciate that, Bob. And thank you everyone for joining. So with that, do I have a motion to continue this hearing until the 22nd?
So moved.
Wonderful. Seconded. Motion to move the comprehensive permit hearing for the Brush Hill project to the 22nd. Do I have a second?
You have a time,
7 p.m. Thank you, Michael.
and the Board of Health is meeting at that same time. Do you want to try to do it earlier or like?
6 o'clock work for people, or is that too early?
Let's stick with 7. That will happen with Board of Health. Will happen with Board of Health. Everyone will be being coordinated, but I don't like the idea of unless we're going to the 23rd or something like that. But the 6 o'clock meetings, it's too easy to forget them.
Okay, let's just do the 7 o'clock. So 7 on the 22nd.
And what I will suggest, Zach, to Daryl is that she put us on the timing calendar a little later in that evening so that we can obviously participate in both.
Okay, appreciate that. So I think we have a second. So do we have a vote by roll? Fitch?
Aye.
Labby?
Labby, aye.
Novak?
Aye.
McBride, aye. It's continued until the 22nd. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded.
Wonderful. Mr. Fitch, how do you vote?
Fitch votes aye.
Wonderful. Novak?
Novak votes aye. I do see 2 hands up. So you're the chair.
Jeannie, do you have 20 more seconds? Do we have a way to continue this on someone's iPad? I know you were texting me.
No, Jeannie will turn it over to me. You can keep going.
Okay. 2 hands are raised. Let's go with Mr. Horsley first before we close out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do have a comment relative to the scheduling. So let me just pull that up. Mr. Murchison was referring to the letter from Stantec, and I think there's an important additional comment from Stantec, which you should be aware of, especially if you're scheduling another meeting. The last comment, number 16, is a response to one of my comments, and I'll just read 3 sentences. It will take a minute or 2 or less. We have discussed that there is uncertainty. This is one of the inputs to the groundwater modeling that we've been debating. We have discussed that there is uncertainty to the depth of bedrock under the septic system, SAS, which is critical to the evaluation of groundwater mounding. Although we have seen the Sherborn Groundwater Protection Committee, some abutters have expressed concern about the possibilities of fractured bedrock effluent. If the board wishes to pursue these questions further, they should ask the applicant to conduct and provide geologic logs for 3 minimum borings within the septic system SAS area. And I'll stop there. I agree with that comment. One of my comments on the groundwater mounting, if they don't have the site-specific data, the peer reviewer that Mr. Murchison referred to and agreed he would comply with completely suggests 3 additional wells. So you can meet in another couple of weeks. I don't know if Mr. Murchison can get this work done in 2 weeks and enough time for us to review it, but this is in the Stantec letter, which he has indicated he is willing to comply with. I want to make sure you're aware of that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you for
paragraph number 16, the last one in the letter. You can read.
Bob, 1 second. You'll get a chance to respond, Bob, just before we close out. Thank you, Mr. Horsley. I will review that late breaking letter in detail again. Mr. Hill, I see your hands raised as well.
Thank you. Just really brief. Attorney Haverty made a comment that the environmental impact health statement requirement is only required for Chapter 40B projects and none other. And I just want to correct that. That's not true. There's actually 8 categories of land uses that require environmental health impact statements, not just Chapter 40B. Chapter 40B projects are 1. And then I had a question that I'd like to ask you, Mr. Chairman, and perhaps it's a question for the applicant through the chair. Now that we have a revised plan that shows 4 units, is the applicant withdrawing the 8-unit plan? Because I think it's an important question. I've had projects in the past I've worked on where applicants propose a plan and then revert back to the old plan. Is that going to happen here? Is the 8-unit plan now off the table? Or is the applicant reserving the right, there's that saying again, another penny, is the applicant reserving its right to go back to that 8-unit plan if he doesn't like the decision you render on the 4-unit plan?
Thank you for that question. Bob, can you respond to that if you're
I think I'll have Paul respond to that.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me again?
Yes.
Okay. We always have the right to revert back to the original plan. Any appeal to the Housing Appeals Committee can be made on any plan that was submitted during the course of the public hearing. So we don't have to specifically state that we're reserving our rights to that plan, but we are, of course.
Thank you, Paul.
And I did want to address the comment regarding the environmental regulation. I did not state that there weren't any other categories of that regulation that are applicable to other projects. What my statement is that it is not applicable to any other similarly sized projects. The only reason it would be applicable to this project is that it is a Chapter 40B project. There's no other portion of that regulation that would be applicable to this if it were not a 40B.
Thank you, Paul. Rick, do you see any other hands raised?
I do not. And I move the question being to adjourn.
Second.
Oh, but I think Bob actually wanted one more response. Actually, I promised him. So
go ahead. Sorry.
You promised me 5 minutes ago and I waited.
Yes, he was patient. So
and you don't have an electronic hand. You were polite enough to put your regular hand down.
No,
so I apologize.
All I'd like to say is that, again, Scott put words in my mouth that I was willing to do this and willing to do that. I would prefer that I speak for myself and Scott can speak for himself.
Okay.
And I would be grateful if that could be our way of change.
And I think it's clear that you don't want to do any more at this point than you are legally required to do, but you are willing to have a conversation if it means we can come to a compromise, which means that neither one of us are happy. So
I think you've characterized things correctly, but the idea, I can tell you the idea of going out and doing borings into the bedrock, which, by the way, we never hit when we tested. We went down, all over the property, at least 10, if not more feet, and never hit bedrock. I'm not interested in getting a big machine that costs that kind of money out there to do that. So no, I'm not interested in that. If you want to
Thank you
talk
for-
about more reasonable, things that are achievable in the interest of what I would consider important information, or stormwater, as we talked about, there are other things. Massive amounts of additional testing is not in our future. But I'm willing
Understood. Thank you, Bob. And with that, I think we have a motion to adjourn, and it was seconded, and we started voting. Is the motion still on the table and seconded?
Yes,
it is.
sir.
Wonderful. So, Mr. Fitch, how do you vote?
Fitch, aye to adjourn.
Wonderful. Mr. Novak?
For the love of God, aye to adjourn.
Wonderful. Mr. Labby? He definitely wants to adjourn. McBride, aye. We'll see you next week for perfunctory extension.
Thank you.
And
very
some
much.
other things. And other things on the agenda.
And other things. Yes.
Good night.
Good night.